This is a Rogue Media Network podcast.
Greetings, cartoon connoisseurs, and welcome to the Animation Conversation, where we explore the art form from pencils to pixels. And now, here are your hosts, Rusty Shackleford and F.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Animation Conversation. I'm Rusty here with...
Hey everybody, it's your old pal F. What's up, party people?
There you go. Well, F, we have a really cool guest today. I've been excited about this all week actually, because it's my guest. I'm the one that acquired this guest. I didn't have to have industry credentials to acquire a guest. Kind of like F, I didn't have to have industry credentials to somehow con you into doing a show with me. So here we are. Our guest, Pinkie. Hi, Pinkie. How are you doing today?
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Oh, awesome. We're happy to have you. I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy horse schedule to come hang out with us for a few minutes. I've seen your TikTok page and stuff like that with some of your horse stuff on it. I think that's really cool. I like. I'm from Texas, so that southern Colorado feel is almost like that. Texas kind of feel too. It's kind of got the same kind of cultural feel to it with the ranches and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I've seen your storyboards, and oh my goodness, I'm almost sad to have you on the show because you're crazy talented.
Thank
you. Your boards in particular, you seem to have gotten to do a lot of the stuff that I love to do, which is acting and posing and stuff like that. And if you guys haven't seen Pinkie's work, my goodness, go to the page, because if you are aspiring to be a board artist and want to learn acting and posing and stuff like that, look at Pinkie's work, because it's absolutely stunning.
Yeah, I agree. How did you kind of maybe let's not get too quick. So let's go way back. Let's say when did drawing and wanting to be an animator, when did that kind of come to fruition for you? When did you come to the realization this is what I'm going to do regardless of whatever it takes to do it, kind of thing?
Well, I think that I got a lot of my coworkers and friends in animation. I realized they're a little bit more introverted than I am, and I find that interesting because I think they kind of close themselves off and draw, and I say I didn't really have as much of a choice. I was a military kid. I also partially grew up on a ranch, so I didn't really have the close friend connections. Every 3 years I'd start over, and if I wasn't starting over, I'd live on my family's ranch where I didn't have high-speed internet or all the video games that a lot of kids my age would have. I hear people saying, oh, millennials, they don't know what it was like to suffer through this DSL internet or dial-up internet. And I'm like, well, I did, because I was kind of stuck behind everyone else, having a little bit of a rural childhood. So I was always drawing. I drew a lot of the horses on our ranch. I drew comics about our dog being a superhero. It was just entertainment for me, when a lot of people my age, I guess their entertainment was more glued to a TV. And when I had access to the TV, I was glued to it, and I watched early 90s Nickelodeon. So I grew up drawing. My mom was actually an art teacher, and I didn't want to do what she did because that was what mom did, and that's not cool. And she was always trying to encourage me to draw more and encouraging me. She was super supportive because she was an artist herself, but I actually didn't want to do that when I was a kid. I wanted to grow up and be a horse trainer, and I do both now, but I didn't discover animation as a job. I knew it as an entertainment thing. I always drew comics, but I didn't discover it as a job until maybe I'd say really late in the game. I was 19, and I saw storyboards presented at Comic-Con. I didn't even know storyboards were a thing. I didn't know the process. I was aware of the 9 old men sitting in front of the huge desk and animating, and that's what I thought the job was. I thought you just sat down, and I didn't even really think about a script or anything. I just thought they just made the cartoon and then they put it on TV.
Now see, and I don't want to interrupt because I want to hear every bit of your story, but that was exactly my experience. It was 100% the same thing. I didn't grow up with horses, but I grew up on what was ostensibly, a Walden style. My parents had this idea of us being self-sufficient. And so it was our own little farm in rural Kalamazoo, Michigan. And so, watching cartoons and stuff, that is exactly what I thought. I'm like, oh, I love cartoons, but that looks really tedious. And so
Yeah.
I did the exact same thing you did. I think it's almost a requirement as a young budding cartoonist to do a comic strip about your pet as a superhero. But anyway, I had to bump in because I feel like I don't know that many people who had such a similar experience as that. But the ones that I have met are exactly the same. It's like, yeah, I didn't want to get into animation. It looked completely tedious.
Yeah.
But then got exposed to storyboard. So please continue.
No, it's interesting. I haven't really met any other people that had that experience too. I know a lot of people that were like sitting in front of the TV and drawing frame by frame. And I was never that kid. I never drew frame by frame until I thought, I really need to study and learn what this is. I really want to get into animation. And that's when I was like fresh out of high school. I started to go to community college for graphic design because there was no animation schools. I was in Southern Virginia at the time, and I didn't have access to that. And I also didn't have the funds to go to animation school either. So at the time I thought, I'm going to go into graphic design, and then whatever classes I can would transfer to an animation degree, and then I would just take out a loan. Luckily I was hired before I got to that point, but that's when I was doing, like, I had my laptop and I'd pause frame by frame. But I was never the kid that was pausing the VHS tape and studying it. I was not a driven, motivated kid to like study animation like a lot of my peers I've met. I just drew whatever I felt like. And it was mostly comics about, I had one comic about wild horses, and it was pretty much like almost like a television dramedy where all of the horses had like interconnected relationships, and they were breaking up and getting together and fighting each other and like fighting rival horse clans. And then I had one with like my family dog that was a superhero, and it was really an original idea because it was called Super Puppy, which I'm sure no one would ever think of that. I'm sure every single had a Super Puppy comic.
Now, see, that raises an interesting point, and one that I like to beat home as often as I possibly can. So please back me up, because if you disagree, I'm going to be really embarrassed. No, but one of the things when I got roped into it was that storyboarding is really not so much about drawing at all. It's about storytelling, and you seem to have been telling stories from the very beginning.
Yeah, but I have like different feelings about storyboarding because I got into it because I liked the drawing aspect of it. I thought it looked really fun and loose and exciting. And when I didn't really realize what it actually was until I was in it. I've always loved sequential art. I liked the storytelling aspects of it, but I was more drawn into like how animated you could get with it and how much like I was more into the posing. And when I was in it, I realized, oh, there's so much more to this. You're telling a story with the camera, you're telling a story with even just props and elements in the background. There's so much more than just having fun, bouncy animated characters, which is what I had got into it because I thought that was interesting how much control you could have with the posing. And then when I was in it, it was kind of a shell shock because I started storyboarding on TV. I wasn't doing it in college. I was self-taught, and then I was just immediately hired and thrown into television when I was like 21, 22. So I was learning as I went, and it was surprising as I came along, but then I fell in love with it in a different way because I initially thought I wanted to do character design, and I learned the hard lesson of character design is not the fun, like you're creating a character every time. It's a lot of tedious nonsense. When I was in boarding, I was like, this isn't what I expected it to be, but I enjoyed it more. And I think now I enjoy aspects of boarding that I didn't when I first started.
Yeah, it's that whole you get a taste of blood, like, yeah, because you really are as a storyboard artist, you are the one literally controlling what the viewer sees, thinks, feels. And you mentioned backgrounds. It's 100% true. Like you can put a flower pot with a pretty flower in the background, and there's a subtle little thing that'll make your viewer feel, oh, there's a, this is a safe environment. Or you can put sinister looking. It's literally, you are in control of the viewer. And that was one of the first things that I found intoxicating, was this idea of like, ooh, I can just fuck with people this way,
Yeah. So for me, from like an audience perspective, like, going over the last 6 episodes that we've recorded now, like I've really grown, like a special understanding for storyboarding, I guess, that I didn't have before. I really didn't appreciate it in the way that I do now, and it's I feel like you have to have a good storyboard artist for everything to piece together. Like, you could have people that are, lacking in areas in other parts, but the storyboard artist guy has to be like the sharpest tool in the shed. He has to have the head on the swivel and kind of stuff. And I don't know, I really wish that I would have done some drawing stuff now. Maybe I could have been a storyboard artist, but probably not, because I can't draw. But yeah, so from the audience perspective, yeah, it's every time I talk to somebody new, it's just like, wow, that's it's like a new perspective kind of thing. So you put a different perspective on it than F puts on it, kind of thing, about how you treat storyboarding, what storyboarding is for you. So I don't know, that's what I guess that's what this animation conversation stuff's all about.
Well,
you don't want a storyboard.
Yeah.
You don't.
No, I don't. You're right. Absolutely right.
If you talk to any board artist, one of the first expressions you'll see on their face is pain.
Yeah.
So, what all projects have you worked on? I have your IMDb up, but I'll just let you tell like your favorite stuff you worked on and stuff like that throughout your years with Nickelodeon.
So I was hired when I was like 21 or 22. I'm 27 now, and I had been on every SpongeBob, like anything in production, spin-offs, films from that point till now. And now I'm working on something new that I can't really talk about in public. But it's funny, people would think that my favorite to work on out of everything in the SpongeBob universe would be SpongeBob, the proper show, because that's what I grew up with, and that was my dream to work on that show. But it's actually not. I loved working on Camp Coral, which is the spinoff of SpongeBob from when they were all kids in summer camp, and it's a CG show, which is also surprising to me that as a 2D artist that I would love working on the CG show. But what I loved about it was SpongeBob is something I grew up with, and it's been around for 20 something years, and their world is so fleshed out and developed, and you have to follow all the rules of everything going on. But when we were handed Camp Coral as a project, we got to take that property, but we didn't know what it looked like when they were in summer camp, and we didn't know what it was like when they were 10, 11 years old. And I got to design brand new characters that we fell in love with, which is something that you wouldn't really introduce to SpongeBob. Maybe for like a one-off episode, you'll have a completely new design of a character, but we were creating friendships and new characters with ones that I had already loved and grew up with as a kid. So it was almost like I got a chance to create SpongeBob, even though it really wasn't my time. I was a very small child in the 90s. I got to dip my hands in stuff that I already loved, but introduce my own voice to it. And I felt that was really special. We also had a lot more freedom with some of the jokes and some of the concepts, because on SpongeBob, we had a question of like, well, we've done that before. And even if we bring them to a different location, all the locations are established. I mean, we have all of these, I call them sets, but all of these places that have existed for like 20 years. But on Camp Coral, we're like, well, what would it look like if they were here? Well, we have to make a whole new set for it. And it was also cool to see that translated into CG, where you're like, I drew this, and it's like a real thing, like a physical thing, even though it doesn't, I guess, exist in physical space as we are. You get to see something that you created, and you're like, this is a 3D building, and you can like put a camera in and walk inside. It was a whole different, really fun experience, and the crew was awesome. I had a great time working on it. I know it's not everyone's favorite property of the SpongeBob universe, and everybody prefers the main show.
But well, from like
I fondly look back on my time on it.
Yeah, so from like an audience perspective again, because that's the only purpose that's the only reason I'm here. Otherwise, it would just be F talking to you by yourself. So
just be us talking shop.
Yeah, just talking shop, and I love it. So like, I really don't care if I get to talk for a whole episode, like the Robert and Zeddy episode. I don't think F let me get a word in edgewise, but I don't care. It's just beautiful to get to be a part of this stuff, being from a little town in Texas, and like I said, I've only been doing this like 2 years, so it's crazy to me. But back to Camp Coral real quick. So for me, what I liked about Camp Coral was the fact that it was like CG or whatever, and it was like super unique. It didn't look like every other CGI thing. Like, you guys, whatever you did, you put like this soft spin on it, and it just looks, I don't know, I just really I was looking through it last night, and I was actually watching some of it because I'd never I'm a little older for Camp Coral now, so it was just something that missed me in the wave of things. But I got kids, so it was, I put it on, I'm watching it with the kids and stuff, and I don't know, I loved it. I really liked it. So anybody that doesn't like it just doesn't appreciate good art, I don't think. But I really enjoyed it.
I think it's like hit or miss with spin-offs where you have people attached to a property.
Yeah.
So it's hard to get people on board with something brand new. But they worked really hard to get that the CG on that show. We really wanted to match the level of animation we had on the 2D shows, which is extremely stretchy, extremely cartoony, very expressive. And the Team Technicolor in India worked really hard to match everything, where there were so many like conversations back and forth with our studio and our team, and people staying up late to talk to people in India to try to make everything happen. There was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to make it that, because with CG, it's almost like posing a doll. It's almost like animating, like, because it's something that exists. So you're like posing a toy. And in order to get some of the poses and match our storyboards, the models had to be, I guess, broken so many times and recreated. And there was this one sequence, and I have it somewhere on my Google Drive, where it was like their animation test for us, and they followed a SpongeBob episode that was 2D that already existed, that was already on the air, and they had to animate that in CG. And I can't speak for the process because I'm not a CG animator, but they pretty much had to make like a whole new SpongeBob for all of these different crazy poses that he was doing, because you just can't do that with just a standard model. It's basically just like a toy, and there's so much stretching and bending you can do, but when you're doing these big, broad, crazy poses, they have to make like a whole new almost like character.
I know a little bit about video game development, stuff like that, and it's kind of, I guess, similar in the same way, where you have like this 3D soft body that you control and move around and stuff like that. And from like my experience with like the video game side of it, and like, trying to compare it a little bit, like you're saying, you have all these, well, on the on a video game, you have all these nodes and stuff as you're moving whatever your character and stuff like that. And like you said, if you have all these exaggerated things, your nodes only do so much, so you have to create a whole new, like, weird shifted creation, like you're talking about, like character. They have to be kind of shifted weird to be able to reach that next limit, to do that outlandish stretch or whatever it is you're talking about. That's pretty cool.
I can't believe we're able to do that on a TV budget. I still can't believe what we were able to pull off. I mean, if you look back at like Jimmy Neutron, that was a huge thing to introduce to TV. That's a CG show, and that pipeline was insane. And from what I've heard, that they broke a lot of render farms, or had a lot of like crashes on their computer systems trying to make that in the early 2000s. And we have the technology in the render farms now, but what's insane to me is what we were able to do on a budget, because it's comparable to like CG movies.
It's beautiful. I love it. Like I said, it's I think it's unique, like I said, in CG stuff. And I've been watching CG since the inception of CG on TV. Reboot and Beast Wars Transformers are two of my favorite cartoons, and they're like the first two late 90s TV shows that were CG out of Canada. It was a Canadian company that made them. And so just to see the evolution from those first CG shows to what they are now, it's just phenomenal, especially like Camp Coral, and like how beautiful it, like you said, it is. Just I was really taken back by some of the scenes and stuff in it, and I'm like, this is a TV show? Are you sure this isn't like a movie production? Like, is this going into the movies kind of thing? You know, so it was just, I don't know. I love it.
What I think a lot of people don't necessarily realize, and why would you, is when it comes to hand drawn versus CG, the thing about CG is when you're doing CGI, suddenly you can move the camera anywhere and you can do crazy stuff with the camera that when you do it hand drawn becomes very labor intensive. Whereas if you're doing lots of character stuff, lots of big character poses, like much easier in hand to make that translate into CGI. It's like Pinkie said, you're dealing with a puppet, and if you're or a toy or whatever, and you can make that toy stretchy and squashy and all this stuff, but eventually you're going to reach that limit. Whereas if you're drawing it, there's absolutely no limit. So, you know, whenever, and I'm saying this really, you know, for the benefit of the people who aren't in animation. If you're watching something and you see lots and lots of crazy camera movements, that's always easier in CGI. In CGI, just moving the camera in any crazy fashion you want is 1,000 times easier in CGI than it is in hand-drawn animation. And I feel like that's where a lot of shows wind up shooting themselves in the foot by, you know, going, okay, is this show going to be more about character animation, or is this show going to be more about the action? And if the show's about the action, then you want to do it in CGI so that you can move the camera in all kinds of crazy ways. But I'm also gonna I'm gonna hop on the bandwagon too and say that in terms of the way it looks, Camp Coral is a really neat looking show. And man, if I were like 8 years old or whatever, that it is the fact that they look like little toys that would just I've gone bonkers for it.
That's what I like about it. Yeah, it's beautiful. Like, I mean, they look like little, you know, something you would see you would open out of a package and play with and set up and, you know, put in a little SpongeBob pineapple thing. And, you know, it's just, I don't know, this is beautiful. It's some of the most beautiful
we did that
CG.
So bad on the show. We wanted toys. It's a shame that it came about in the, like, decline of toy era where everything is, like, either apps and the only toys you really see are, like, the blind bag things or, like, little STEM toys like slime and stuff. So we're kind of like exiting that era that we grew up with where everything was like a play set and everything's like an action figure. That's not really the thing anymore. And we were so disappointed because we all wanted that too. We wanted, I feel like sometimes people our age are more into toys than actual children, especially those of us who work in animation. We all had like our cubicles all up with all kinds of like animated TV show toys. And we're all desperate. We wanted Camp Coral toys. And we had someone on the team 3D printed some of our models from the show. And that was a big bloodbath to fight over on our White House Christmas party.
Now, speaking of growing up, I want to backtrack a little bit because you had mentioned that you broke into the industry at 19, which just blows my mind because I was your age when I broke into the industry. So, you know, tell us how that happened at age 19 that you came to, you know, start working on such a prestigious like legacy show right out of the gate.
Well, I said earlier I was in community college, and that's when I was really trying to hone in my skills. I had applied to some different job listings for studios, but for those of us who work in it know that I don't really know anyone who's gotten a job off of a listing. Everybody's been recruitment, word of mouth, already in the industry. So I don't really count that as like a rejection or a failure, just because I'm pretty sure, like, I have a friend who works on like more indie projects, not for a bigger studio. And he has people apply to his indie animation show. And they were going through all the applications, and there were like 10,000 just for his smaller production. And I can't imagine what a studio gets. I mean, if you guys get a chance to talk to a recruiter and have a recruiter on your show, that might be really interesting to hear their opinion of like how you go through that, because I can't imagine how many people, like when I was applying to a Cartoon Network position, I can't imagine, like, you get every Yahoo on the internet who's drawn a stick figure before, and then you get people like actually experienced applying to it, and some people are great and they don't have a good portfolio, so you're just sorting through, just trying to find a needle in a haystack. And I don't really know anyone who's been hired that way. So that's where I was, because at the time I was in Virginia, my dad got stationed there, and then I stayed there to finish high school. And I was kind of stuck because I wasn't anywhere where there would be creative people. I really wanted to go to SCAD, which is in Savannah, Georgia. That was like the closest like big art school to me, even though my dream school was SVA. My family did not have New York City money. But I was really like, people use the word grinding and it's a little bit embarrassing, but I was really grinding hard. At the time I had quit my retail jobs and was just doing commissions, and I would stream like 6 hours a day, 6, 7 hours. And anyone who came into my live stream, I would offer a commission right on the spot. So you send me money on PayPal, I'll draw you something immediately, instant gratification, email it to you. And I get like regular customers, I get new people, frequent people in that would just pop in that had never seen someone draw live before. And they're like, I don't know, can you draw my dog? And I was just tossing things out. And that's how I did the math, and I made more doing that than my $7.25 an hour working retail. And that's when I quit the jobs and I just focused on that. And it also gave me time to build my portfolio, which is something a lot of young artists don't get to do, don't have the time to do, especially when you're in the struggle that I was, where you are trying to just make money. And it's hard when you're like working those part-time or full-time like retail jobs or going to school to build that. And I was lucky by having that income from that I had built from doing commissions on streaming, that I could quit everything and just focus on my portfolio. And I worked really hard studying like classic Nickelodeon stuff. I really wanted to do like really cartoony comedy things. I at the time had a portfolio built for character design because I loved sequential art, but I didn't think I had the skill to storyboard. Completely self-taught myself everything. And then I was reached out by a director on SpongeBob, and he asked me to do character designs because that was what my portfolio was initially. And I wanted that job so bad that I sent him 120 designs for one character. Typically like 4 to 6 for like options for a character, and I sent 120. And I'm sure this character appeared on screen for like 3 seconds total. But he asked, because I also sent it over in Storyboard Pro just to prove that I had the program. And he asked, well, do you do storyboards? And I said yes. That was basically a lie, because I mean, I was self-taught and I like piddled around with it, but you wouldn't call me a storyboard artist because I had never produced anything. I had never made like a whole sequence of something. So the most I did was watch tutorials, which actually the guy who reached out to me to hire me, he was the one I learned from, because he did tutorials with Toon Boom, with Storyboard Pro. And when I sent that over to him and he said, do you do storyboards? I said yes. And I learned, I figured it out as I went. I moved to LA and started working in the studio, and just, it wasn't easy because I didn't have the experience, but I taught myself as I went. And it was one of those things that it's like a true fake it till you make it. I said, yes, I need a storyboard. And like many years later, here I am, and I do know how to storyboard, and I'm confident in it. But at the time it was just like, sure,
that's awesome.
Yes, I will, because that was my only option. I really wanted that job, and that was the only way to get it.
Yeah, I love those. I love those kind of stories, because F stands for fib, because F has a similar story where he was a big fibber and he got into the industry. Go ahead, F. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, it's really almost uncanny, because I moved out to LA to become a character designer. I figured that, like, I knew about as much about storyboarding as you probably did at the time, but I didn't think I could get a job in it in a million years. But I figured, character design, that's something I can do. And I applied for the Wild Thornberries as a character designer. I need storyboard artists. Can you storyboard? To which I had the exact same reaction that you did, and I was like, yeah, you betcha, storyboarding. Oh yes, indeed. And then the next thing I know, I'm storyboarding, zebra stampedes on the Wild Thornberries, which was no fun at all. But so they literally, someone on SpongeBob literally like saw your work online and reached out to you. That was the wow, that's amazing to me.
Yeah, it was Sherm Cohen, who's a director on SpongeBob, and some of his work, like I looked up to his work. a lot when I was younger. He was a storyboard director on the first SpongeBob movie, and you can see a lot of his style in that film if you're familiar with it. Like I feel like just watching that first SpongeBob movie, there's so many poses and expressions, and I'm like, oh, that's a classic Sherm drawing, and that's all just like animator nerd jargon. Anyone who doesn't look at it the same way that we do just appreciates like a good and funny film, which is absolutely fine. But as an animation nerd, I truly recognized his style language in that film. And when I was at Nickelodeon, I had learned that there were several other people in the studio who did have their eyes on me, who were following me and liked my stuff. And there were discussions within the studio that we should hire Pinkie. I really like Pinkie's work. I realized there were a couple of people that I ended up working with who recommended me. So it was more than one person. And that was really flattering that I found out when I got there, that it wasn't just one person that stumbled across me. There were several people who had followed and liked my work. And we did that with several other people. Like once I was there, we would do the same thing where we'd be like, did you see this one guy on Instagram? His stuff's amazing. And we're all talking about it and sharing it. And then like a year later, that guy's my coworker. So I got to experience firsthand what happened to me. And that was really cool and magical to watch it happen to other very young artists get hired in.
It's worth noting though, and I want to point this out, that because lest anyone just go, oh, Pinkie just got discovered. You got discovered because you were doing the work. Like you as you called it, you were grinding out, work hours and hours per day and putting yourself out there.
Yeah, I was pouring through the social media stuff that you have and everything. Like I probably went back to almost probably like 2018, just scrolling through and looking at all your artwork and stuff like that. As somebody who's done content creation, I've done content creation through Twitch and stuff like that for over a decade myself, like doing that kind of stuff, and just seeing the consistency that you have, because that's one thing people always ask. Well, how do I do this or how do I do that? That's one question I get with podcasting is like, well, how does your podcast get viewers and stuff? How do I get people to listen to mine? And it's consistency is like the major thing to being discovered by anything. If you want to be virally discovered, you have to be virally consistent. You have to be putting all your stuff out there. You have to like put your heart on your sleeve and bear all, and like just put it all out there and hope somebody gets it or likes it, kind of thing. And that I appreciate people like that, and I think that's why I get along with F so much, because it's like it's that same mentality of no matter what it is, we're going to put it into the world whether people like it or not. We're at that phase in our life where it's about our own happiness. Screw what everybody else thinks. It's time to put our stuff out there and do what we want to do, kind of thing. And it's cool to see that in younger people too. That's one thing I appreciate about a lot of the generation of people that are doing animation stuff like that I see on F's page and that I see on your page, younger teenagers and stuff. It's beautiful to see that they're all out there just doing this consistent stuff. They're all putting their stuff out there every single day, and I feel like that's being nurtured more than when I was a kid. I don't remember kids wanting to draw and animate when I was in school, and now my son, he's in school and he's got friends that are like, there's like a lot of them that draw, and it's a cool thing. Whereas when I was a kid, it was like the kids that were drawing were like the manga kids and the anime kids, and they sat at the table by themselves, and they were kind of like an outlier, and people like picked on them and stuff like that. I didn't, but it's just like it's now so accepted to be artistic and to be that way openly and put it out there for people to see. When like in our generation, when I was a kid, there was no way that a lot of the stuff
some of that's adults, that's us, because I was punished for that as a kid. We got in trouble for drawing class. I didn't do well in school. I did horribly, actually. I pulled out my high school diploma recently looking for some old tax documents, and I was like passing with mostly D's except for like in my electives, which I had A's in. And I had always done bad. I'd always been like C's and D's. I've been skirting by, and I draw in class all the time, and no one saw that as ambitious. No one saw that as a talent. They saw that as goofing off. But when you tell people that I work in animation, especially people who knew when I was younger, they're like, well, that makes sense. And you were always so talented. And I'm like, well, I didn't think I was. I mean, people said I was good at drawing, but nobody treated it as a valuable talent, like the kid who's good at writing or math, or any kids who excel in like actual classes in school.
Now this brings up a really interesting thing, and this is one of the things I like to do with this show, which does dig a little deeper, I feel like, than on a lot of other shows that talk about animation. You mentioned your childhood growing up, and yours was sort of it was different than what probably a lot of people are used to, being, again, a military kid, and specifically being a military kid. And then the farm or the ranch style environment. How do you think that sort of thing, that kind of environment growing up, fed into not only you as an artist, but you as a humorist, you as someone who specializes in comedy? Like, how do you think that all of that like connects?
I think, well, one, I think you kind of have to have a sense of humor to deal with some of that shit. Because, first of all, I think a lot of the reason why I got into drawing and telling these stories and making these comics were mostly because I would tell these stories and make up these characters, and these characters were my friends, because being a military kid is a lonely existence, and I was an only child. So you move from place to place. If you make these friends, you lose them immediately. You move to a new place, and all the kids have already had a best friend. You never have a best friend because you're always the new kid that shows up, and you kind of wiggle your way into some social group. But what was my frustration is nobody had history with me. No one went, oh, well, April's been my best friend since kindergarten. Nobody had that. It was, I would show up and I was a friend for a while, and then I would move. So all of these stories, and what was special to me about cartoons is all of these characters were my friends. Like, if I turned on the TV and watched SpongeBob, they were always the same. I knew their history. I remember when SpongeBob first started at the Krusty Krab, and it sounds sad, but it is like a human connection thing, that we all grew up with these characters as they feel like our family and friends.
I think it's beautiful.
Those were the stories I would tell, like in the comics that I told about all of these horses in this herd that were all like, there was infighting and drama and relationships and friendships. They were all like based off of toy horses that I had, and they went everywhere with me, and I knew them. And I think that experience really encouraged me to make up these stories. But my dad had a great sense of humor. He was always really sarcastic, and I didn't spend a ton of time with him as a kid because he would work a lot or he'd get deployed. He was in Iraq and Afghanistan. He was a navigator and flew fighter jets, F-14s, which is what the movie Top Gun.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, the movie Top Gun is actually, they filmed some of Top Gun at his old Oak Club and base, but
nice.
that was what he did. And I grew up with parents that were just like funny, had a good sense of humor about things. But I think if you live that lifestyle where you have a family member who is constantly putting their life at risk, and when you're dealing with things like I make a lot of content with our horses, and there's a lot of fucked up shit that happens with animals. Like, if you have cows and you've ever heard a family member say the cows got out and they're rampaging down the street and bulldozing down your fences, there's a couple of things you have to be comfortable with when you have livestock or farm animals. One is swearing, and two is humor.
Yeah.
We had goats, and man, they were angry, ornery creatures.
Oh, goats are the worst. I think they might be like the worst livestock to have to take care of because they are so ornery. Or guineas. I don't like guineas. Guineas, to me, the only purpose they serve is to alert you when there's something there. Other than that, like, guineas used to, my friend's grandma with the farm that we used to go hang out on, the guineas would chase us. They would like attack us and chase us. And she had like 40 guineas, and they would just chase us all over the property. They were like guard dogs for the cows and everything. And they just would not, they just roamed the property like some wild, like cassowaries, just tearing everything up on the property. They were nuts.
Goats somewhere along the line hired a really prestigious PR firm, though, because in the past, in the past few years, everyone has decided that goats are adorable. And I've had to tell people,
cows. Everyone wants like a little mini cow or something, and I'm just like, there are some cows that are evil incarnate.
Oh,
that you
they can
not
be
want
assholes
anywhere near you.
Yeah, and goats in particular Actually, our girl goat was really sweet, and I treated her like a pet, and she was really nice. And when she had baby goats, I was there, and it was all cute and everything like that. But man, our boy goat was a dick.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm prejudiced against goats now, but that was my experience with goats.
Well, the goat community is going to be in an uproar.
Therapy.
Yeah. I was going to say the goat community is going to be in an uproar. Your Twitter feed is going to be blown up with the goat community now.
No, they're not. Anyone who has farm animals, like you could say the same about horses. If you could say the horse community will be in an uproar if you talk shit about horses. Nobody hates these animals more than the ones taking care of them. I'm sure the goat community is thrilled.
Yeah.
Well, and again, the smarter the animal, the more personality you sort of come across. And my goodness, horses are some of the smartest creatures on the planet.
You would think.
or not.
Well, it's so funny is like, so I work with and I train horses. I've used my horse on set for TV commercials, and we've had questions with directors where they're like, can the horse do this? And I have him trained for some things that work on all sets. It's called like at liberty work, which means he's not wearing a halter or anything, and he just responds to my commands, go here, go there, stop, back up. And those are the basic ones that are like, that's just that's basic acting that gets you in on any set, because that's also a safety thing. Is like, you need horse to go point A to point B, he listens, he behaves, that's good. Everything else is a bonus. And they want to ask like, can we have the horse do blank? And I don't know what like non-horse people and these directors think. Like, they write something in a script, and I don't know if they think of like, oh yeah, he already knows how to do that. The answer is always like, well, he doesn't, but give me 2 weeks and he will. And it's pretty impressive to see how quickly you can teach them something. And sometimes they're simple tasks. Like, I was reached out, they were doing like a reboot of Mr. Ed, and they wanted a horse that could talk. And my manager had one horse that could already do that, but he was and I'm talking horse terms, but he was a paint horse, so it's the one that has little splotches of color. Mr. Ed is a palomino, that's the gold with white hair. That's what my horse is. And I said, well, if you're doing a reboot, it has to be another palomino for Mr. Ed. I said, I'll give me 2 weeks and I'll teach him how to talk. And we did that, and then got that job on set. But it's incredible how fast they learn, but it's also incredible how fucking stupid they are. And how often you find a horse like they'll do something called casting themselves, which is a horse will roll over, and if just 1 foot touches a wall or fence, they can't get back up. Like, they can't roll, they will not roll to the other side, because once a horse rolls over, it's like a full 360. They roll on their back and they'll roll around in the dirt, and then they'll flip over on the other side and stand up. When they are blocked, they can't flip from the other side. They will lay there like a dead turtle, legs up in the air. And what you have to do is tie ropes around their legs in the air, and if you have another person, thank God, but sometimes it's just you, have to pull as hard as you can to pull their legs over so they roll back the other way. Because they'll turtle themselves, and some will start thrashing and freaking out. I'm lucky that my horse doesn't. He just kind of lays there helpless and waits for me to come help him. But there's so many stupid things with like God made horses to fail. Like I'm surprised society was built on them. We won the West on them. We built amazing buildings, pulling carts with horses. And this is how we have modern society now. And it is phenomenal that we got there with them, how they're programmed.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned
they probably get a lot of mileage just out of being attractive too. They're a good-looking animal.
Yeah, they are. They're very majestic. They probably
get a wide berth for that.
Yeah, they're very majestic. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Mr. Ed. I just started a rewatch of the old show, so I thought it was funny that you mentioned that. I like to watch old stuff. I started watching Mr. Ed, and then I'm watching an old cartoon. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, called Brave Star. I don't know if you're familiar. I know you're familiar with it, but I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, Pinkie. It's the premise of the show is it's a planet that has been repopulated somewhere else. It's like a science fiction type deal, but it's called New Texas. And the protagonist is like this guy named Tex, and he's like real, Texan, and he's like a space sheriff. And I thought since you like horses and stuff, I think that you would appreciate his sidekick, because his sidekick is like a robotic horse named 3030. And the voice for 3030 is an old actor from the 60s that played in all those spaghetti westerns. So he's got like this really super spaghetti western accent on the horse. It's just a really, really good one. It's actually worth watching, I think.
I'm inclined. I could be getting this wrong, but I feel like that was an old Filmation cartoon.
No, it's Hanna-Barbera.
Was it Hanna-Barbera?
Yeah, it's a Hanna-Barbera cartoon. Yeah. And it's actually a good one. So it was from that era of just like when they were just pumping them out left and right. That one is actually decent. Like, it's actually not that bad story-wise and stuff. It kind of it actually has like a story that you can follow instead of just random episodes.
Maybe I'll get into that and go back to Warner and pitch a reboot for that.
There you go. Yeah. Do that. That'd be awesome.
Now, are you presently working in the studio, or do you work remotely?
I'm in Colorado right now, so I've been work from home for the past 3 years. When the pandemic hit, I never went back into the studio. Actually, like a year later, I went and I cleared off all my stuff, and I was sad. But at the end of the day, my life is so much better being work from home. I have a lot more freedom. I set my own hours. It's easier. My lifestyle. It was a difficult thing to balance, like horses and being in the studio and working. And it's nice to be able to get like natural sunlight and not be blasted with like 50-degree air conditioning all the time. Yeah. So it was hard. Like when the pandemic hit, it was really different. It changed the social climate. I was used to always having these fun conversations with coworkers, popping by, seeing what's on everyone's Cintiqs. But I truly think this is the way to go with animation. I feel like I talked to one of the executives at Nickelodeon about this recently in a Zoom call, and I told her I love the parties. Like, I like going to the studio parties and mingling with everyone and doing screenings, but there's not really that big of a need to have that everyone all in one place all the time, because actually it's a little bit more distracting and we don't get our work done. We all end up talking for 2 hours by the coffee machine.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. And again, I hate to, well, no, I don't. Storyboarding is so it's draining in every possible capacity. Yeah. I mean, because you are flexing so many different muscles. You're flexing muscles as an artist, as a storyteller, as an actor, as all these different things, that it's draining. It's emotionally, it's artistically, it's even physically draining. Yeah. I don't blame you in the slightest. And I've found the same thing. I now live in North Carolina, and any time, and you can tell me if I'm wrong about this, Pinkie, but I mean, when you are boarding, you're making the cartoon, and anything you have in your corner that helps you out, even if it's just this much, it's helpful. It makes a big difference.
Yeah, and that quality of life really helped, because I was also long distance with my girlfriend, and I would fly to Colorado constantly from LA and go back and forth, and I'd have to have another trainer friend get my horse out, and then I was taking, now I take like TV gigs with him on weekdays instead of just weekends, and that's opened up like other side of my life that I just started doing for fun on the side. I was already working with horses, but then now it's like it's turned into a second job, and both are gratifying in different ways, because being on set in live action is a whole different hands-on experience of being a part of the making of it. Like, I prefer doing commercials, because you show up and you start filming and then you finish and it's done. Like, the whole thing's done and it's going to air very soon. It's just a day of work, and it's all done. So that's gratifying as someone who works in animation, where you spend weeks and weeks and then you don't see it for another couple of years. So both things kind of and you're being outside and it's way more social. Both things kind of exercise something else for me, where in storyboarding I keep getting
nah, you're good.
calls.
It's all good. It happens.
Storyboarding, I have more control over it, and you're right, you are making the thing. If you look at that's why I post side-by-side videos on my social media of, here's the aired episode and here's my storyboards, and you can see how they look pretty much exactly the same. I tell people this all the time. Like, you start at the beginning of the week and you have
totally.
like a blank panel, and every time I'm like, I don't know, that's crazy. It's whatever. I'm just gonna get through this week. And at the end of the week, you play it back and you're like, holy fucking shit, I just made a cartoon. And when you look back at it, like, you get so into it. Like, what is this, close this, and doing all this, and you're focusing on the technical. And when you look back at it, you're like, oh my God, I make cartoons. It's insane.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, and this interests me a lot too. I'm curious to know, because you've now been storyboarding for what, 8 years are we on now? And you've clearly.
I'm not good at
What for you is still difficult about storyboarding after because by the looks of it, the acting and the posing and stuff is very second nature to you, or at least you make it look easy. But what for you is still a challenge when it comes to storyboarding?
One is the starting. I mentioned that when you have the blank panels and you're just staring at it, I feel like the easiest thing to do is old school, just thumbnailing and trying to get that out. Because once I've thumbnailed everything, I'm like, oh, I know how to do this. But when you're staring at the blank panels and you're looking at the script, or like listening to the audio or whatever you have as materials, you're like, I don't know. I wish someone else would just make the cartoon happen. Mondays are always the worst. Hey, you get your hand out, you're like, I don't want to make the cartoon happen. And then my favorite part of the process is when you're actually like flowing and thinking of the ideas, and you have really good jokes and you're like, oh, this is so funny, I can't wait to make this happen and show someone. But it's always the starting. And I've talked to other board artists about that, and I'm like, Monday's a throwaway day, or whatever day you get your assignment. I'm like, that's the day where you look at it, think about it. And thank God, like, at least work from home, you have more freedom to be like, just get up and do something else. Like, once you've read it, you looked at the script, you walk away from the desk, because all you're going to do is just sit there and stare off into space. Walk away, yourself a sandwich, go do something else, go to the store, talk to a friend, do something. Because the real life, living in real life is where you get your ideas, where it'll start coming to you. Sitting at a desk is not. Like, even if you're just sitting there listening to music, watch a TV show, I tell you, like, get your assignment and fucking leave, because nothing's going to happen there. At least I have to get it and I have to leave, because I'm not going to make something on the first day. I have to accept that the first day is entirely this. As much as you think that I'll get everything done and then I'll have an open Friday and I can go have fun with my friends and family. No, you're not doing it on Monday. Monday's useless. Just look at your material.
Yeah. It's funny, because when I got made storyboard supervisor on the Fairly Odd Parents, and by that time, when it came to Nickelodeon, I could just sort of write my own ticket. But my bosses would get furious at me, because I would get handed a new assignment, and for the first 2 days for me, I would just pace the studio, or I would pace around on the roof of the building. I would just pace and pace and pace, so that I would have the entire cartoon up in my head, so that by the time I sat down, I was ready to go. But I would pace, and I wouldn't be at my desk, and they'd be like, why aren't you at your desk? And they would scream and holler, and I'd be like, look, you love my work, right? And they're like, yes. I'm like, if this is what I need to do in order to produce what I produce, why do you care? And that's why I agree with you. I think the way that animation is going in this regard, it's a good thing.
Yeah, I don't know which of the 9 old men said this. I'm going to wrongly credit the wrong guy, like Mitt Call or Ward Kimball or whoever said this, but there was one of the 9 old men who absolutely hated when artists listen to music at their desks. Like, absolutely. Like, you just have to be, if you're gonna animate, you got to be in dead silence. And I'm like, okay, well, if you're a psychopath, that's fine, but everybody else do their own thing, because that's insane. Just sit down in dead silence and just work. But I'm the same way. It's like, I'm up and gone as soon as you've given me the assignment, and I'm not playing hooky. It needs to happen. And I tell people this all the time. I'm like, what's more effective for you as a human being? You just sitting at your desk, staring off into space with blank stuff in front of you, or you go make yourself lunch and go for a walk and take that time to do something else, because it's still not going anywhere. You could sit there all day, and then what's going to happen is you're just going to get frustrated with yourself, and then you're not going to have anything good come of it. You're just going to, on your first day of your assignment, you're going to be frustrated. It's not productive.
Well, that's about all types of creativity, because it's elemental. You've got to have the right pieces for the puzzle to all come together, because I'm a writer. I like to do creative writing and stuff like that. So when I'm writing something, or even a poem or whatever it is that I'm writing, it just doesn't come to you. You know what I mean? It's like people think that because you are a creative person that you could just boom and automatically just throw something on a piece of paper and it's good to go. But there's an actual process.
Anyone's supposed to do that. Like, I don't know anyone in the world where you're like, here's the idea, make it, and then they just sit down and like, sure, like if you hand me the assignment, storyboard this. I don't know anyone who could just be like, okay, and just start storyboarding. It's so strange.
For decades and decades and decades, that was that assembly line process. That was kind of the only way to do it. But now, oh my goodness, we live in a time and a place where it's not necessary anymore. So I'm surprised that there's any pushback at this whatsoever. Like when I was a director, my whole thing, well, and I guess I still am, when I'm directing people, as long as whatever they turn in is fantastic and by the deadline, I don't care what they do to get their inspiration.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is like creativity is just not. It's not a one size fits all approach. A lot of jobs, it like when you're thinking of like an executive, that their numbers, their paperwork, their this. Creativity is not that. It's not sitting at a desk. It's not having a bunch of stacked papers in front of you, and that's not what it is. You have to go and experience stuff to have like some kind of type of creative inspiration. And I think that's one of like the disconnects. That's kind of like what's going on in the industry right now with like some of the writing stuff that's going on is they don't understand that this creative process is without it, you don't have like authenticity. You could chat GPT your heart out, but without it, you don't have the authenticity. And that's one of the things that kind of like disheartened me recently with the Marvel show using the AI sequencing in their deal. And I'm like, well, that's a slippery slope. You want something weird. I know thousands of artists I've seen on Twitter that could draw you some weird stuff. Like, you don't have to use an AI generator to get authenticity in your weird stuff. Matter of fact, it's uncomfortable when I see AI. And the only AI that I've seen that's been commercially used that I thought was like topical and maybe okay to use was there's a recent video game that was done by the Rick and Morty creators, High on Life or something like that, I think it's called. And they used some CG, they used some of the AI to make movie posters on a background that was like the background is human drawn, but it was just the movie poster that they used for AI. So like I could see the adaptation of it being used, but it is so scary to see that a major company is writing contracts with an AI firm. You know what I mean? I think that's definitely sketch.
The bottom line is, though, I mean, I have yet to see anything by AI that has even come close to being anything weirder or more demented than the average animator's sketchbook. You take a peek into any animator's sketchbook and you will see stuff that... But anyway, getting back to you now, Pinkie, I'm interested to know, like, you've been in the industry for 8 years. What are your aspirations?
I would like to get a show sold. I do have a complete Bible and a pitch. Now's not a great time to sell, but that would be my next journey. Is I'd like to sell something. I'm currently interested in like dabbling around with doing takes on pre-existing IP for studios, but at the end I would like to sell my own idea. I don't know if and when will be a good market for that, because right now it really isn't, and we're already going through our struggles with the writers' strike, and we have to have some big change and revolution to streaming and how television is. But everything goes up and down. It goes in trends. I have a feeling that we'll be on the horizon once we get out of that mess, that everybody's going to be hungry for new creator-driven shows and ideas. That's where I'd like to be. For the time being, I'm just happy to have work and float while everything's difficult right now.
That's one of the things that I really like about the new animation studio that Mike Judge and Greg Daniels have put together is the amount of new stuff that they're putting out in the world. I really think we're on the precipice of like this big renaissance for animation. I think we're like right on the cusp of a big wave, and like my fingers are crossed too. Yeah, my fingers are crossed too, because I'm a huge fan of animation, a big fan. I have SpongeBob at home on VHS tape. I have I have so much history with animation outside of what you guys do, and that's why I started this kind of stuff. Is just it's to show people a greater appreciation for the stuff that they consume, because I think a lot of people, we consume things, whether it's cartoons or books or coffee, even whatever it is that we're consuming, we're detached from it. We're just viewing it from this lens, and that's why I like being able to talk to you, and I appreciate you for coming on. We're gonna wrap it up, but I appreciate you for being a part of our show and stuff like that, and taking the time to help us out, because you're doing me a favor by being here. I'm not doing you any favors by you being a part of our show. So again, I appreciate your time and everything, and I appreciate your perspective and view, because that's what it's about. It's about animation conversations and getting perspectives from you guys and what you guys actually do, and giving you guys a spotlight, because there's just too much underappreciation, I think, for the craft of animating, because everybody watches it.
If I can piggyback on what you just said too, because I know we're wrapping up here, but it's funny. TV executives would sit around, and live action TV executives would sit around. They'd go to comedy clubs. They'd go, "Ooh, look at Jerry Seinfeld. He's super funny. Let's give him a TV show." Were I an animation executive, it would be a no-brainer to look at Pinkie's work and go, I don't care what Pinkie has. We're doing a show created by Pinkie, because everything you do is funny. Everything you do has life. And so it's kind of a no-brainer. And it's my hope that that's kind of the direction that things are going to go in. But sure. Like I said, if it were up to me, I would just be like, give me a show and we'll put it on, because I know it's going to be great, because that's the quality of your work. And by the way, I'd pat myself on the back for being, this is awesome. I don't have to do anything. Pinkie's just going to hand me gold. So I want to echo what Rusty said. Thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been really enlightening, and your story is super interesting.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm sure there's a million things that we didn't even get into, and so I'd love to have you. I think we'd both love to have you on the show again.
Open invitation. Anytime you want to come talk about something, or if you have something to promote or something like that, and you want to come promote it. Also, if you ever get that King of the Hill job, would love to talk to you about King of the Hill. If that ever comes to fruition for you, let me know. I'd love to.
That ship might have sailed. So we were talking before the podcast, and I did have an offer to go on with them, but then the strike happened. So that might be gone, but I'm definitely open to new opportunities. Like I said, I'm starting on something new soon that I'm going to be boarding the pilot for, but I'm pretty open for whatever comes along, because I would like to eventually sell my own thing, but for the time being, I'm just going to keep working and trying to stay afloat while we settle this mess with streaming.
No, see, wait, I'm really sorry. I don't mean to take up everyone's time again.
No, you're good.
I have to ask real quick, have you ever boarded a pilot before?
No, this will be my first.
I've made my living for the past 15 years practically doing nothing but boarding pilots. You're going to love it. You're going to love it, because you get to create the language of the show. Yeah, I'm really excited for it. That it's a big deal to me.
I'm excited to consume it. Yeah, I'm excited to consume it.
I boarded half of the pilot for Rick and Morty, and it's so funny for a show that's been on for so long now. You can still and it's one of the few shows that I did the pilot for that actually made it on the air and became a success. Because that's the thing about pilots. You do a million of them and one of them gets on the air.
Yeah.
But I mean, I can still turn on Rick and Morty and be like, oh, that's like that because I did it that way in the first one.
Yeah, you set the tone for it.
Yeah, no, you're going to have a blast. Boarding pilots is awesome.
I'm excited. I hope this one comes to success like Rick and Morty did.
Yeah, that's what I brag all the time, that I get to talk to the guy who set the tone for the whole show. So that's one of my little brag things I walk around, because a lot of my friends like Rick and Morty, and when I told them that I now kind of like work on a show with the guy who storyboarded the very, very first episode that everybody gets to see. I don't know. Like I said, this is for me doing this whole podcast stuff. I don't know. It's nuts to me that it only took me like a year and a half to get to a point where I get to talk to people who create stuff that I love to watch. It's just,
we are way
awesome.
More readily available. Like animation is such a niche community that the superstars in animation are still just hidden gem people to the rest of the world. Like people I think are huge, like I'm a huge fan of. To the rest of the world, they're pretty much nobodies. The superstars
absolutely.
to me in my field are just like, I mean, what's cool about how humbling that is the people who created these things that are so much bigger than them that we all love and adore are just some guy that you could just message on Twitter.
Yeah, for sure. And that's what happened with F.
Because you say the name Vince Waller, and the average person doesn't know who that is, but I'm like, Vince Waller, like I'm acquainted with him, and he's like, Vince Waller, rubber nipple salesman, my God, and that's another reason it's been great. It's been great talking to you, Pinkie, because there is nothing. It's been a while since I've heard another storyboard artist talk about storyboarding, and it's one of those things that's always enriching.
Yeah,
I'm always happy to come on and talk about how painful it is.
War stories.
Yeah, you have a wide open invitation for sure. Yeah. We appreciate you being on. And do you have anything you want to plug, promote, anything that you're creating that's accessible to people on social media or anything like that?
Unfortunately, right now, I don't have a ton that is coming out, and what I'm about to work on is entirely secret. But
well, whenever you can talk about it, let me know, and we'll have you on, and you could talk about that. That would be great.
Yeah, but my social media, Pinkie Tunes. I'm also on social media doing horse things at Ye Hollywood. My only thing out right now that isn't like a SpongeBob property or NDA is my horse is in a High Noon commercial. So look out for that on TV, and just know that that's Jeepers, and that's our work. But besides that, just my social media.
Yeah, go check her out. That's Pinkie Tunes. I'll link all that stuff in the bio. I'll link your website and stuff too.
Awesome.
Her website has a ton of stuff on there for everybody that wants to go check it out. Again, I appreciate you being on. And F, do you have anything before we sign off?
Well, as always, please everyone go to Fountain's Pen Cartoons on YouTube, like, share, and subscribe. We are quickly becoming an incubator program for a lot of the undiscovered talent that we were talking about with Pinkie earlier. People who are just trying to build up their portfolios. We've created a venue for them to do exactly that. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, please go to. I'm excited for you to see what we're doing, because
trust me, I'm
as an industry expert, you guys are both gonna love what we're doing. And again, it's Fountain's Pen Cartoons on YouTube. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm really easy to find. So
yep, there you go. That's
thank you again for coming on. I'm gonna let Rusty wrap us up, but for now, I'm F Zigga Zigga party people.
Yeah, so thanks again, Pinkie, for being on. I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to come hang out with us, me and F here. And everybody, thank you all for tuning in. That has been another titillating episode of Animation Conversation.
And that brings us to the end of another incredible episode of Animation Conversation. We hope you enjoyed this animated adventure as much as we did. Remember, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for future episodes, we would love to hear from you. Feel free to reach out to us on our social media channels or through good old-fashioned email. We value your input and want to make Animation Conversation a podcast that resonates with animation lovers like you. Our Instagram and Twitter are @AnimationConvo. Our YouTube is @AnimationConversation. Our email is theanimationconvo@gmail.com. Before we say our final goodbyes, we want to remind you to stay animated. Keep exploring, appreciating, and sharing the magic of animation with others. Let your imagination soar and let the world of animated wonders continue to inspire and captivate you. Thank you once again for joining us on this incredible journey. Until next time, this is Wubcake, signing off for Animation Conversation. Keep watching, keep dreaming, and keep the animation conversation alive.
This has been a Rogue Media Network production.